Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Erica. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. So today I want to talk about the Terowie Institute Theatre. Terowie is a town based in the mid-north of South Australia. Now, Terowie was a private venture by John Avar Mitchell, who initially built a pub on the main road near the Inkerman mine in about 1875. Very soon, houses started to be built around this pub, and then soon more buildings, and the township of Terowie was established. Now every town needs a gathering place, and Mitchell donated the land that was needed for the building of the Terowie Institute. Works were completed around 1879, but sadly Mitchell had passed before it was completed. By the 1920s, Terowie was a thriving railway town. It would become a very important transport hub as a change of gauge station. South Australia had a complex mixture of different rail gauges in use at the time because different companies owned and operated different rail routes and lines. So up until the mid-1960s, the Terowie railway station was a hive of activity and the main employer in the town. In the 1970s, the rail line between Terowie and Peterborough was converted to broad gauge, which meant that Peterborough now became the change of gauge station. The railway yards of Terowie would then become silent, and it completely closed by the 1980s. But back to 1921, the census shows us that the population of Terowie was around about 650 peoples. It really established itself as a township. There were several pubs now, general stores, butchers, bakers, drapers, a flour mill. There were medical facilities, blacksmiths, a coffee palace, and you could buy yourself a motorcar at Dodge Brothers Motorcars. And then there was somewhere to go to see the pictures. In the 1920s, travelling picture showmen were typically the provider of picture show entertainments in the smaller towns across Australia. But in Terowie in the 1920s, A.J. Maloney and P. Norse set up New Era Pictures, and these were to take place within the Terowie Institute building. An agreement had been met for the New Era Pictures to hire the Institute building each Saturday night for the purposes of providing films for the populace. Music for these silent films, because they would have been silent, would be provided by either Miss Fanny Markey or Mrs. Mundy. And it seemed to be going well. Everyone's, which was a magazine for the entertainment world, it sold itself as the motion picture authority in Australia, ran a report that on the 24th of November 1926, Mr. Maloney of Terowie had visited the United Artists Exchange in Adelaide and had booked United Artists 1927 product. The films, like the films in Strathalbyn, would have been delivered via train to Terowie. So in 1926, Everyone's, the magazine, was reporting that J. Maloney's new venture, the New Era Pictures at Terowie, was doing good business. However, in 1928, a year before the Great Depression, South Australia had actually entered a recession. And the minutes of the Institute Committee meeting dated the 29th of February 1928 show that New Era Pictures had fallen behind with their payments. But they must have paid up because New Era Pictures would continue to establish Saturday night as film night in Terowie until the mid-1930s. By then, the talkies were the norm, and perhaps it was the cost of the required equipment that was actually the death knell for New Era Pictures. So after the closure of New Era Pictures, the Institute building was leased to George Park's Travelling Picture Show. And then later, during the war years, Leicester Pictures would show films 4 or 5 times a week. Now, Terowie during the war years was a staging centre for transshipment troops because of the change of gauge. Hundreds of troops would gather into Terowie whilst they were waiting for their onward journey. In 1948, several of the townsfolk got together and set up the Terowie Community Entertainment Committee. The committee members would fundraise and even use some of their own money in order to purchase the equipment and plant that would be needed to run a show. At an initial cost of around £1,700, they placed down a £300 deposit and used hire purchase to fund the rest. By about the mid-1950s, the hall was in need of repairs. And although essential improvements had been done in 1953, there was a lot more still to be done. By 1957, the success of the film shows meant that they were now being shown twice a week. And it was this near £225 income for the year from 1957 that added to the bank balance that allowed for further repairs to take place. The authors Marina Gray and Philip Wood, in their book about the history of the Institute, state that it is very possible that without the films being shown at the hall, that it would have actually fallen into, and I quote here, an unmanageable state of repair. Here we have a great interior photo of the Institute. So this is a point of view of standing where the screen is, looking towards the back of the hall and onto the main entrance of the hall itself. Above the door there you can see some projection outlets, and that's from the bio box that would have been located there in the hall. Now, I've been very lucky to speak to many people on a Facebook page called Next Stop Terowie. They remembered going to the pictures in Terowie in the 50s and 60s, and they were very happy to share their memories with me and with you as well. So there would be, to start off with, a stand-in rendition of God Save the Queen, and then after that, the format each night was typically the same. There would have been a newsreel. Now then there was interval time. Now the patrons could either purchase refreshments from a lollipop tray if it was available, or they could make the dash down to, there were 2 delis in Terowie at the time, and they could make a quick dash to either of those. Didn't have a long interval, so they had to hurry. What would follow then would be the main picture, and then of course that would be the conclusion of the night's entertainment. During the entertainments, they would be using glass hand-produced slides to advertise local businesses, perhaps the delis, and there were also some slides that gave the results of local local football and basketball games. The seats that you can see in this photo were purchased in 1952, and they cost around £1,200, and as you can see, they're still being used today. Now, many of the people I spoke to on the Facebook page mentioned that they were quite uncomfortable, and that many attendees would actually bring their own cushions to add to the comfort to these hard chairs. They were also cold, apparently, in wintertime to sit on. Later, there was an installation of CinemaScope and an upgraded sound system. Now, there was no air conditioning in the hall. Instead, all the doors of the Institute would be open to provide some ventilation. So you can see the door straight ahead, but there's also one on the left and one on the right. When you think of going to the pictures, you typically think of picture theatres as a business. It's housed in a purpose-built building. You deal with anonymous people. But for many of the smaller towns in Australia, going to the pictures is a much more personal event. It probably takes place in a multi-purpose building, such as a local institute. You may even know the people, may know most of the people in the room, if not all of them. You may know the name of the person at the ticket box, the person that runs the film, and it's even possible that you yourself had taken some part in getting the show on the road, so to speak. Small town cinemas such as the Terowie Picture Theatre were an essential thread within their society. I mean, some people I spoke to in the Facebook group remembered that The picture theatres at the Institute building was a place in which to be seen. There were many friendships and romances started there, and for some, a trip to the movies led to to a lifelong marriage or a lifelong love. Others within the group remembered the fun that they had, many mentioning a guy called Johnny Hill and his torch. Now, Johnny would shine his torch on you if you had done something to annoy him. And it seems that he would threaten to kick you out of the theatre, but it appears that he rarely did that. He never seemed to actually follow up on his threat. Sadly, however, change was in the airwaves, and in 1959, television arrived into South Australia. Now, some of the members remembered that by the mid 1960s, that their households actually had a television, and by the late 1960s, the railways too, the main employer of the town, was winding down. On the 30th of June 1969, films were shown for the last time at the Terowie Institute Theatre. Well, I hope you enjoyed my vlog on the Terowie Institute Theatre. Thank you for your time today. Now, if you're interested in more information, please visit my blog. The address is here. And I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.